Okay, well, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks since we've done a book by book, and if you are joining us for the first time in Deuteronomy, this is great. We're still early in the book. If you are interested in catching any of the previous sessions, those are all available on my YouTube page. Just search for Jason Duman on YouTube, and you'll find them, and they're all organized by book. So today we're going to be walking through Deuteronomy 4:41 through 7:26. And so it's not a ton of text today, but it's a good amount. So we'll get right to it. Starting in verse 41. Then Moses set aside 3 cities east of the Jordan. So if we remember, Deuteronomy is Moses's last words before the people of Israel go into the promised land. And he's not going to go. He knows that he is, because of his disobedience and striking the rock instead of speaking to the rock, the Lord is not letting him go into the promised land. So he's giving them all the things that they need to know before they go in. And the cities that the Lord commanded Moses to set aside are cities of refuge. So these 3 cities are the east of Jordan, to which anyone who had killed a person could flee if they had unintentionally killed a neighbor without malice aforethought. They could flee into one of these cities and save their life. The cities were these: Bezer in the wilderness plateau, and the Reubenites, Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan for the Manassites. All right, so the cities of refuge are all about it's a place where the people who accidentally killed somebody, so manslaughter in our modern language, somebody commits manslaughter, and maybe they give an example in other passages where they were talking about this, or maybe they're cutting down a tree and that the axe head flies off the tree and accidentally kills somebody. That person, because they had killed somebody, could be life for life, right? But if they could run to one of these cities of refuge to find protection while an investigation is going on, to determine guilt or innocence. As long as they're in that city, they are safe. The avenger from the family cannot come and get vengeance on that person. And so these 3 cities are on the east side of the Jordan River, and they are sorry, we got a feedback thing going on. All right, found it. No, I didn't. Sorry.
It's a good no.
Okay, cool, great. So the east side of the Jordan River. Remember, there's 2.5 tribes that have decided to stay on that side, and their soldiers and stuff are going to go into the promised land, but they're going to set up their establishment on the east side of the Jordan River. So they need their own cities of refuge over there. And so there's going to be 6 total in the land of Israel, 3 on the east side, 3 on the west. And as long as that individual who killed somebody is in a city of refuge, they cannot be executed. And the sentence for being in the city of refuge is essentially until the high priest dies, because the high priest serves as a representative for the people of Israel, and so his death serves kind of like a great reset for the people with regards to manslaughter charges. So so that's the last thing here before he goes into more of the law. And this next section in chapter 5, we're going to get a second telling of the 10 commandments, and they're very similar to the 10 commandments that we received in Exodus chapter 20, but there's a few variations. The laws are the same, but some of the details within the laws are changed. So chapter 5 verse 1. Hear, Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them and be sure to follow them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. It was not with our ancestors that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire of the mountain. At that time, I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up to the mountains And he said, and I'll just pause here. There's an interesting thing that's going on here with Moses talking to the people, because as we remember, the people of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years after they refused to go into the land because they believed the negative report from 10 of the spies. And so they said, the giants are too great, so we cannot go up. So that generation died in the wilderness. Their disobedience, the Lord said, because of your disobedience, because of your lack of faith, you are going to pass away in the wilderness. So for 40 years, the people of Israel were wandering in the wilderness in different encampments from time to time, but those people all died. And now here Moses is saying, it was not to our ancestors that the Lord gave this covenant, but to you. And some of the people who were at this telling in the after this 40 years, they weren't even born yet. And so there's something that we have to keep in mind as we read through the Old Testament and the Hebrew scriptures, is there is a sense of corporate identity that goes beyond an individual's responsibility to say you are a part of a whole. And so the people of Israel, when the Lord talks to you, the people of Israel, he's saying, like, whatever generation you are, I'm talking to Israel. You are Israel as a whole. It's kind of like how people think of Americans, like we are the nation of America, and how one country interacts with our nation affects all of us. And even though there might be things that happened in the 50s with Russia, right? I wasn't there. I wasn't alive, but I am still America because I am in America. And so the Russians, the Soviets, would still think about me today as a part of that America. And that's kind of how the Lord is interacting with the people of Israel. It's like, you were there when I spoke to you. And Moses is setting the stage here to remind them, even though they weren't technically there, that this covenant that the Lord is making with the people of Israel is not just for their ancestors, it's for them today. It's for them as they follow after him. And so this is kind of a reaffirmation of this covenant. And really, the book of Deuteronomy follows a covenant structure that is not unlike covenant structures from other ancient kingdoms, where a greater party, a suzerain king, would make a treaty with a vassal nation. So a suzerain vassal treaty. The suzerain would be the one who sets the terms, and the vassal needs to live up to the terms as a way to honor the greater king. And so in this situation, Yahweh, the Lord, is the suzerain, and Israel is the vassal. And everything they have is because of the Lord's provision for them. And so he wants them to remember the covenant, to remember these words. And the words of the law, as we read through in Hebrew, it's like there's many of the words are just no kill, no adultery, like those kinds of things. And it really is just like a word. And so that's one of the reasons why it's called the 10 words. So let's go into these 10 commandments. Verse 6. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children to the sins of the parents, the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showering love to 1,000 generations to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor the foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, or his male servant or his female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. All right, these 10 words, the 10 commandments, are things that are fairly familiar overall. The first 4 really focus on our relationship with the Lord, and then the last 6 focus on our relationship with others. And so when we get to Jesus and he says, they ask him, what is the greatest command? And he says, the first and greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, which we'll get to in just a minute in Deuteronomy 6. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commands. And as we look at the 10 commandments, they divide that way. And those 10 commandments really are a framework for the rest of the law. And so if we are focusing on these 10 things as a way to honor God and follow his design for life, we will do well in many regards, because we will be respecting the image of God in others, and we will be worshiping God with our whole life. And so a few things to note. Again, the Lord is reminding the people several times that he is the one who rescued them from slavery in Egypt. It wasn't the gods of the Egyptians. It's not the gods of the Canaanites. It's the Lord God alone who rescued them. And so that is why he deserves to be worshiped. As you go down, I'm going to focus in on a few of these. The Sabbath day commandment in Exodus to observe the Sabbath is tied to the creation account. For the Lord created in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. So shall you rest on the Sabbath and keep it holy. And here it's tied back to the rescue from Egypt. Work 6 days, on the 7th day rest, because you used to be slaves. So don't forget that you can rest because the Lord has set you free, is essentially what that one is about. And then another note here is when he's talking about not making idols and worshiping idols, the second commandment, essentially, he mentions that the Lord is jealous, punishing to the children of the sins of the parents of the 3rd and 4th generation. And essentially, it's not that God is out there to go and just smite down great grandkids of people who are disobedient, but he's highlighting that their pattern of disobedience will ripple down for generations. And so if you want your children to be blessed, parents, set them up for a path of blessing, for trusting the Lord, and do what you can to help them follow him faithfully. And then to go to his blessing moves on for 1,000 generations. One of the things that's interesting is human history hasn't actually recorded 1,000 generations. Like that's a lot. And so we're still in this place where we hear the Lord is promising to bless the faithful to 1,000 generations. We're still in that time, which is interesting. The Lord also tells them not to take his name in vain. And that's not just using his name as a curse word, but it's really applying his name to anything that does not honor or glorify him. And so saying things like, well, the Lord told me to do this, but it wasn't the Lord telling you to do that, that's taking the Lord's name in vain. Tying the Lord's name to an organization or a movement in our own culture, even now, saying this is God's whatever, and God is not claiming that, that's taking the Lord's name in vain. And so we should be very mindful. Like, we carry the name of the Lord with us as followers of Jesus. So are we living up to that standard? Not that we have to be perfect, but that we want to honor him in all that we say and do. And then murder, don't kill people. That's a pretty good, easy one. Don't commit adultery. This is part of God's design for marriage is one man, one woman. It's not that people should have multiple spouses or multiple sexual partners or violate their covenant agreements, because God values covenant. He's making a covenant with the people right here. And as you look to their history or their future from here, we'll see that they do violate the covenant, and the Lord talks to them as if they are adulterers because they are pursuing relationships with other gods. And so the relationship that men and women have in marriage is a reflection of the relationship that God wants to have with his people, a relationship of faithfulness. And then bearing false witness against your neighbor is, lying about somebody, or, telling them things that they want to hear that's not truthful or not helpful. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, but specifically thinking about like in a trial, if it is a blessing for you to tell the judge something that may hurt the other person, that's not true, but it could help you. People might be tempted to do that. And so you need to not do that. Don't lie. Don't get out of your way to get in somebody else's way through your false witness. All right. So let's keep going. Verse 22. These are the commandments the Lord proclaimed in a loud voice to your whole assembly there on the mountain from out of the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness, and he added nothing more. Then he wrote them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. So if you remember back in Exodus, the Lord spoke directly these things to the people, and they were overwhelmed by that. And so we're going to get into that. But and the Lord wrote the tablets. And so often we think about Moses, he's holding 2 tablets. Those are like the covenant agreement, essentially. When you heard the voice out of the darkness while the mountain was ablaze with fire, and all the leaders of your tribes and elders came to me, and you said, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we have heard his voice from the fire. Today we have seen that a person can live even if God speaks with them. But now why should we die? This great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. For what mortal has ever heard the voice of the living God speak out of the fire as we have and survived? Go near and listen to all the Lord our God says, that then tell us whatever the Lord our God tells you. We will listen and obey. The Lord heard you when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard what this people have said to you. Everything they said was good. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. Go tell them to return to their tents. But you stay here with me, that I may give you all the commands and decrees and laws you are to teach them to follow in the land I am giving them to possess. So be careful to do what the Lord your God has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. Walk in obedience to all the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you will possess. And so Moses is reminding them of the experience. The people were overwhelmed. They were frightened of the glory of God on Mount Sinai. And they said, Moses, you talk to him. And so this is one of the first times that we see kind of an outsourcing of religious professionalism. The Lord wanted to talk to the people. He wanted to have this kind of relationship with the people, but they pushed back. And so when here in verse 29, oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. I mean, the Lord it reads like he's kind of grieving the distance that the people want to have, because in keeping that distance, they're more likely to disobey the Lord and his commands. And so he's desiring to have this close relationship of love and presence and faithfulness, but they will turn away in the future. But there are great benefits in keeping the law as well, and the Lord knows this. Like, keeping the law will lead to great blessing for generations, and that's what God wants. And so when we read the law, one of the things to keep in mind is the law is not meant to be a burden for the people. It's a path of life. It's a path that should lead to blessing for God's people, and that's his desire for them. So when Yahweh was obeyed, Israel would enjoy that blessing of life itself, but also Israel would be an example to the nations of how to live in such a way that would honor the Lord, which get back to that idea of being a nation of priests, mediators between Israel and the Lord and the nations around them. All right, chapter 6. Some of the most important passages in the Bible for the Hebrew people are right here in chapter 6. These are the commands, decrees, and laws of the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts, and press them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things that you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And so the Lord is calling them, like, all of this is like great preamble to say, like, you must follow God. Remember all that he has done for you, that he is leading you to this land flowing with milk and honey. And that is an image of rich, flavorful, delicious things. And I tend to think about it as like ice cream, or maybe even like a yogurt. Like when I went to Turkey, I had the best yogurt I've ever had in my life. And it was just like, like Greek style yogurt and honey on it. Oh man, so good. That's what the Lord wants the people to have, is like this delicious, decadent blessing. And so he tells them, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And this is a passage of scripture called the Shema. And Shema in Hebrew means hear. And so the command to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might is essentially saying, love the Lord with everything that makes you you. It's not, God doesn't just want your mind. He doesn't just want your strength. He wants your emotions, your heart. He wants it all together to honor him, to worship him with your whole self. And the commandments that the Lord is giving in the book of Deuteronomy, these commandments are how we demonstrate our love for the Lord. Are we trusting him? Are we obeying him? And it isn't just me as an individual to do this, but as a parent, my job is to help the next generation understand the ways of God and his desire for people as well. And so that's when he's talking about, when you, these need to be on your heart. They need to be impressed on your children. Talk about the things of God all the time is what this passage is getting to. When you get up, when you lie down, when you walk to town, when you do all the things. When he talks about tie them to your hands and bind them to your foreheads, this was a thing that people did literally. They took little boxes, and they're called phylacteries, and they would bind like this passage even in a little scroll, put it on a box, and they would walk around because they read this and said, God told us to do this and we're doing this. Was God being literal when he was telling them to do this? I don't know, but people took it very literally. And so when you think about the metaphor, though, of bind it to your head and to your hands, like, what do you think? What do you do? Like, let those be shaped by the laws of God as displayed in the book of Deuteronomy, in the law that we are receiving from him. Moving to the future, though, one of the things that's interesting is, you get to the book of Revelation, and the people are even now that people are talking about the mark of the beast. And I just will say real quick, the vaccine is not the mark of the beast. Just that's not it, because you're not worshiping a vaccine, And the mark of the beast is about worship. What are you choosing to worship? And so for followers of Jesus, if you are choosing to worship Jesus, then you are marked by the blood of the Lamb. You are in him. And so like the mark of the Lamb in the book of Revelation is like God can see that you have bound his commands to your head and to your hand. And that's the mark of the beast in Revelation. Is there's some kind of this designation that people have on their head and their hand. And it is ultimately about worship. Are you bowing down to worship the beast? And so when you read like passages like that in Revelation, remember, it's about worship. It's not about fear or something going on in our culture. Like, where are you worshiping? If you're worshiping Jesus, you're good. You're good. You don't have to worry about accidentally taking the mark of the beast. So I'm going to get off my soapbox on that. So as we recognize that the Lord is one of the important moments here is the understanding of monotheism. And there's a little conversation around Trinitarian thinking as well. So like, as Christians, we hold the Orthodox view that God is one. But we also, as we read through scripture, we see evidence of the Spirit of God throughout the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we encounter the Son of God. And there are evidences of Christophanies, but potentially in appearances of Christ in the Old Testament, when we see things like the angel of the Lord, or looking at things like Daniel with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're thrown in the fiery furnace, and then there's a fourth person in there. And sometimes people think that's the Lord, that's Jesus. We don't know for sure, but there are little clues that there are divine entities that are, God, but distinct. And so, yes, the Lord is one, but we have a revelation in Scripture of a community of one in God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And it is a great mystery, and we will unpack it many, many times in the coming weeks and months. But the law, the Lord is the law is there to help us understand who God is and how he wants us to live. And the Lord is also saying, as you are entering into the land, you follow the Lord, obey his commands, trust him. Don't go to the other gods that are in the towns, the Canaanites and the Baals and the Asherah and all these different idols that are around. Stick with the Lord. The Lord is one. And remember him, because he's the one who's providing you these cities that you didn't build and the wells you didn't dig and all these things. God is doing this. So there's a warning here that as you get into the land, you may get more comfortable. Don't forget what God has done for you, is what he is getting at here, there. Lest you forget. And as you get into the book of Judges, we see the people forget over and over and over again what God has done. They rebel. There's an oppressor that comes. The people cry out. God rescues them. And that cycle happens again and again because God knows that people forget. And so one of the ways to not forget is to recite the Shema again and again. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so every person in the nation of Israel probably would have said this over and over and over again throughout the day to remind themselves who the Lord is and what God has done. Pick up in verse 13. Fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the peoples around you. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and his anger will burn against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the land. Do not put the Lord your God to the test as you did at Massah, which is where they complained about the water. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations and decrees he has given you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that it may go well with you and you may go in and take over the good land the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors, thrusting out all the enemies before you, as the Lord said. In the future, when your son asks you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws of the Lord your God, the Lord our God has commanded us, tell him, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, one on Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household, but he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord God commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all his laws, decrees, the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. All right. So follow the Lord, trust him. If you follow these other gods, the Lord will turn his anger against you. And that is something that the people should not want. But it is something that will happen as you read through the history of the people of Israel. The Lord will turn his anger against them, because his jealousy is not like his feelings are being hurt. Like he's like just petty, like, oh, I wish I had that. His jealousy is more of a, I know what's best for you and I want that for you. And they are turning away. And so the disciplinary action throughout the Old Testament, the Lord is bringing these things to get their attention, but he doesn't just do it. He warns them. Even in here, he's warning them this could happen. And then he sends prophets to warn them. And then they ignore prophets and they turn away. And so then the discipline happens. And so that's part of what's going on in this section. But then when he also says, in the future, your son's going to ask you, why do we do this? And the answer is not because. The answer is tied to the Lord's saving work. Why do we follow these laws? Because God, who rescued us and provided for us, has called us to live lives that honor him. And so the law, in light of God's saving work, is not a burden. It is a blessing to remember the God who rescued them, the one who saves, the one who is greater than all the other nations. And so there's a simple pattern of repeating the testimony of the people of Israel that helps. It ideally helps to stay faithful to the Lord. And so when we think about our own lives and think about what God has done in leading us to follow Jesus, it's important. Like, our kids are going to wonder, like, why do you do this, Dad? Why do you do this, Mom? And, just saying like, well, it's just something I grew up with is not going to be a satisfactory answer to many people. But to say, like, tie your obedience to the Lord to the testimony of what God has done in your life. It's like, I follow God because I have seen his saving work in Jesus. He rescued me from this path I was on and brought me down this path. Even simple practices like practicing generosity. Like, when our kids ask about giving, and we talk about giving in our house, I tell them, like, Judah, when your mom was pregnant with you, we were broke as a joke and I didn't know how I was going to make it, but God showed up. And, telling those kinds of stories and saying, like, we trust the Lord and he provided. So obedience should be tied to testimony, to what God has done. And it's not because we obey because we want God's stuff, but we've already received so much from God. And so we obey out of that generosity that God has displayed for us. Chapter 7. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you the many nations, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. And the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God, and the Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. And so the Lord has given them a holy war to enter into, to go and destroy these 7 nations that are bigger and more powerful than the nation of Israel. The Lord will fight on their side. The Lord will make a way. And there's a reminder here, and we've talked about this in the past, but they need to completely eliminate these people, because the Lord is saying here, they will pull you away from faithfulness. And even like marrying their sons and daughters with your children, like that will lead to greater unfaithfulness in the future. This is one of the reasons why, you marrying a Christian marrying a non-Christian is a difficult thing. And because, it's easy to be discipled by the person in your house, and like they could lead you toward a path that does not honor God. And so that's a good principle. Like if you think about your own marriage, like if you both aren't on the same path with Jesus, that's going to be difficult for you. Not impossible, but difficult. And so be praying for your spouse, be praying for the people that your husband and wife, if you're both following Jesus, pray for them as well, to say, Lord, help us to stay focused on who you are and what you've done for us, that we would constantly be in unity here. So don't marry between these different religious groups. Also, like the Lord says, like destroy every evidence of their idolatry. Don't just say, well, isn't this a cute artifact of pagan worship? No, destroy it is what the Lord is saying. And having it in your house is something that God does not want for his people, because it's easy to, well, Paul says, we know that idols are nothing, but it's easy to make them something. Essentially is part of the way we're wired as people. We're made to worship. And the people, like these things that are imbued with spiritual significance for other people, there's something happening spiritually that we don't always know what's going on. And there's some mystery there, but removing the sources of idolatry is the safest bet to be faithful to the Lord. And so, the Lord is setting up this covenant relationship with the people. And so he's demanding holiness and purity from them as they are walking after him, reminding them that the Lord's doing this because he loves the people and he wants the best for them. And that's what he gets at in verse 7 here. Like the Lord is doing this for them. It's not because they're so awesome. The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors, that he brought you out of them with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. But those who hate him, he will repay to their face by destruction. He will not be slow to repay their face, repay to their face those who hate him. Therefore, take care to follow the commands, decrees, and laws I give you today. If you pay attention to these laws and are careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love with you, as he swore to your ancestors. And the ancestors here are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those ancestors, all tied to the promised land that God promised to Abraham. That's a covenant that the Lord is calling back to, saying, I will keep that promise, and I will keep that promise for you, people of Israel. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers. He will bless the fruit of your womb, the crops of your land, your grain, new wine, and olive oil, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks, in the land he swore to the ancestors to give you. You will be blessed more than any other people. None of the men or women will be childless, nor will any of your livestock be without young. The Lord will keep you free from every disease. He will not inflict on you the horrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all who hate you. You must destroy all those people the Lord your God gives over to you. Do not look on them with pity and do not serve their gods, for that will be a snare to you. So he's calling them. He's saying, you weren't awesome, you weren't impressive, but I love you. I love your ancestors. I made promises to them, so I'm going to fulfill my promises. And as I do these things, the promise is for the people of Israel is greater and greater blessing than anything they would have experienced in the last 40 years. Because the last 40 years, God blessed them. They had meat, they had manna, they had water provisions. They were victorious in battles because the Lord fought on their side. Everything the Lord has done for them is signs of his faithfulness to them because of his love for them. And so he's saying, like, all the stuff that you've experienced now, it's going to be even greater as you follow after me, as you obey me in this land that I am promising to give to you. But don't let the people that are in the land now and their depravity, their vile behavior, their wickedness, don't let that be a snare to you. And so trust, just the Lord is imploring them, trust me, destroy those people. And again, we read this and it's like, wow, this is a lot of like genocide talk. And it's hard to read, but the Lord knows for the people of Israel, this is a snare to them. Now, today we are not Israel. And so like reading these genocide things, like this is not a prescription for us in our modern era. We are not to do this. We're not trying to take the promised land. We're not doing that. And so you can feel okay to say, well, that was then. Now is a different story. We don't have to take all of these things the same way in this situation with this holy war. All right. So verse 17, you may say to yourselves, as you look at the nation in front of you, these nations are stronger than we are. How can we drive them out? But do not be afraid of them. Remember well that the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt. You saw with your own eyes the great trials, the signs and wonders, the mighty hand and outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples you now fear. Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among them until even the survivors who hide from you have perished. Do not be terrified by them, for the Lord your God, who is among you, is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive out those nations before you little by little. You will not be allowed to eliminate them all at once, or the wild animals will multiply around you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, throwing them into great confusion until they are destroyed. He will give their kings into your hands, and you will wipe out their names from under heaven. No one will be able to stand up against you. You will destroy them. The images of their gods you are to burn in the fire. Do not covet the silver and gold on them, and do not take it for yourselves, or you will be ensnared by it, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. Regard it as vile and utterly detested, for it is set apart for destruction. All right. And so here we have one more reminder, like the Lord will drive the people out before you. You've seen him do the work, is what the Lord is getting at here through Moses. You've seen him already defeat Pharaoh and Egypt. Trust that the Lord will drive these people out. There's a couple of interesting images here. The first is, even for those who are kind of stragglers who are hiding in the land, the Lord will send the hornet to pester them until they perish. And I don't know about you, but I hate bees. I hate hornets. It only takes a couple times to be stung or bit by a hornet to be like, those are terrible, terrible creatures. And but if you ever like go to a picnic or like a barbecue outside and like hornets start coming, like it's super annoying. And it's like, I just need to go. I just need to leave. And like enough come and it's like, we can't be here anymore. And that's kind of what the Lord is saying, like, drive them out and I will help drive them out. I will send the hornet to annoy, to pester, to motivate them to go away. Also, another part here is, the Lord is wise in saying, like, it's going to take time to do this, to drive them all out. And that's okay. Because otherwise, you defeat everybody. You're not going to be big enough, Israel, to move into all of these towns and occupy them, and it'll just go over to the wild. And so the Lord is saying, like, it will take time, and I'm cool with that. But keep doing the work. Keep pressing the people out and making them, eliminating them, making their home, their cities, your cities. But as you do that, and this is the last thing, like, don't keep anything that they have devoted to idolatry. And so, they could have built these idols and wrapped them in gold and silver. And, that's very valuable and that's harvestable. You could get that back. You could melt that off and repurpose it, and even repurpose it for God. But the Lord here is saying, like, I don't want that. I don't want idols, idol gold. And even think back to the incident with the golden calf. The people of Israel brought their gold to Aaron while Moses was on the mountain, and he made a golden calf. And the Lord did not say, melt that down and use it right. Instead, Moses melted down, ground it into powder, and the people of Israel had to drink the water with the gold in it. And so it was something that was detestable and vile, and it was going to be processed through the human body and be even more detestable and vile. The Lord does not want to mix any kind of idolatry with his worship of him in any way. And whether that's in the temple or in the individual houses and tents, the people should not mix worshiping God and idols. So that is where we're going to stop tonight. So any questions or thoughts or anything that stuck out to you from this section of Deuteronomy today? What do we got? We went through quite a bit, a lot of stuff. So Dee, Sandy, I saw you guys join in. Welcome. I didn't get to say hi when we got started, but it's good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I just want to thank you, Jason, because I read through the Old Testament on my own last year.
Okay.
And it's just really cool to go through again and hear your thoughts on it. And it's made a lot more sense this time.
Oh, good. That's
So
all I can ask for.
And yeah, I really like the part about forgetting what God's done. I think it's so easy for all of us to do that, and especially when you're scared and trusting, and then things get comfortable again. It's really easy to slip back. So it's a good reminder. I got a tattoo, and I know people have different thoughts on whether those are good or not, but I'm so stubborn. I really wanted like a visible reminder on my arm to never forget what God's brought me out of, because I need that personally. So
Yeah. Well, good. Great job reading through the Old Testament on your own. It's not easy.
No, and it scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, so I didn't want to touch it ever again. So going through it, and I want to just learn more. So thank you for letting me join in. Yeah.
Well, my hope is this is going to be a long journey through the books. Yeah. And the more we understand the narrative of the Old Testament, the more beautiful the New Testament becomes.
Yes.
As we see how Jesus fulfills the hopes of the people. And so, so it's I love the Old Testament. There's so much weird stuff in here, but also like some really beautiful, amazing things. And even the weird stuff, when you think about it, like, why is this so weird? There's a lot of beauty there too. And we did talk about tattoos when we were in Leviticus.
Yes.
And so one of the key things that we talked about there was that, the marking and tattoos in pagan culture were often about worshiping false gods or ancestor worship and that kind of thing. And so a reminder to remind what the Lord has done for you is a different kind of thing than the tattoos that the pagans were doing back then. And so that's something to keep in mind. So this is a tattoo agnostic zone. Like
thank you.
As long as you don't have a tattoo that says worship Satan, you're fine. So, All right. Any other thoughts, questions? I see Jeff it looks like Jeff, you're typing something. So I'll keep my eyes to the chat, but any other thoughts?
I have a question. Wait, how does it fit into the picture?
Wait, what? Which I didn't hear the first part.
Halloween, how does it fit in the picture?
How does it fit into the picture for Christians today?
Yeah, well, and even the things that God said about idols and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the church is getting more involved in this Halloween stuff than ever before.
Right. Well, part of the goal for, like, I grew up like no Halloween ever, right? And if you did have anything on October 31st, it was called like Harvest Party or Fall Festival or whatever. And so part of the tension here is like recognizing that Halloween has an origin that is not the spooky and the scary. It's All Hallows Eve. It's supposed to be a holy night, because that's what hallow means. And so for us as like followers, as churches today, like there is a way that we can redeem this day without getting into the spooky and the evil and the demonic. And so doing something like trunk or treat as a way of saying like, hey, instead of going to a haunted house, or instead of using Halloween as a way to scare people out of hell, as some churches do, let's create just a fun place to just have a safe environment to build community. And so, yeah, so I would say like, if you are getting into like super scary and demonic imagery with Halloween, I think you're going the wrong way. But if you are saying like, I'll give kids candy, like, I don't think that's wrong. But I do think we need to be mindful of like, how are we engaging All Hallows Eve? So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But I've also been on the other side of it in back east of the demons and the stuff, and that it's really real. And people, it's like I went to church on Sunday, something was made a mention of a Halloween, and they caught it right away and they weren't very happy about it. So
this Sunday?
Yes. And
okay.
And I was there, so I know that they did. But I've been around demons and satanic churches and levitation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like people think that you believe in it, even if you don't.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking. Where do we draw the line? Isn't there some way we can stop doing things on that day, and then maybe a week or so later have a thing for October or whatever for fall time, and the neighborhood, and invite them to come in and have some lattes or whatever, and have some sermons and some games and things for the kids. I realize that kids feel a little left out, but I always saw that when I lived in Virginia, with taking them all right about the time all the kids were out. We'd go out for Chinese dinner, which was usually not hardly anybody there. Got them what they wanted, got them bags of candy for that weren't talked about for Halloween or anything. Mm-hmm. That was our evening. But where do we draw the line? Do I initiate it to everybody to go ahead and go out and go to Halloween? Come on over to my house and whatever.
Yeah, if you want to host people at your house to have a Halloween or an alternative thing, great. Mm-hmm. But I think the line that I have drawn for me, for my family, is like, we're just not going to get into demon stuff. Like, it's real. We don't need to mess with it, even if it's a cute little thing. It's like, no, this is real stuff. We don't mess with demon stuff, but it's okay to. Costumes are fine. Wearing a costume is not a problem. And being a part of a community event is not a problem. Just don't give yourself over to the darkness.
Yes.
And
I appreciate as a mama having a safe place to bring kids too, that can just be kind of fun, dress up, candy. As a kid growing up in the church, I wasn't allowed to ever do that. I was just told it was all evil. And so it kind of made this weird obsession for me. And I got into some very dark stuff in a rebellious way. I think I got obsessed with Stephen King way too young. I'd sneak into the library. I don't know if I would have done that if it had been so cut off to me in that way. So It's
Mm.
taken me a long time to get rid of nightmares, and I think I invited a lot of very bad stuff into my life. So I do appreciate when churches are able to provide community events that are
Right.
more on the tame side for my kids, because I feel like it gives them some fun, but and then you can also teach that in your own home, how
Yeah.
to navigate that.
Yeah. And that's part of, I think, what this passage is talking about, like the importance of parents talking to their kids about what is going on in the world. Like, why do we follow God this way and not like the people in the other countries and other nations? Like, why are we doing these things? And tying it back to, look, the Lord has rescued us and we're going to obey the Lord. And so that family conversation is a key piece. My parents, we all kind of came to faith at the same time. And so they didn't really have a strong understanding of the law of God and all these different things. And it was really just like, well, we were told not to do it, so we're not doing it. But there was never, and like, there was no explanation for me as a kid. And so with our kids, like, we talk about what we're doing for Halloween, and like, we would go trick or treating in one of these neighborhoods, and there was like a haunted house, and we're like, we're not going in there because there's no reason for us to introduce fear into our lives. Like, we don't have to go into that house. And so, yeah, but families need to work these things out and tie it back to, what does faithfulness look like for the Lord? How do we honor him? And how has God rescued us? And that's why we honor him. So, Carrie, were you going to say something? I thought I saw or heard maybe you chatting.
Well, kind of a conundrum. I mean, I'm kind of with Sandy on that. Samhain, which is in the occult, is Halloween night. It's the highest. It's where the witch covens get together, and so it's a very electrically charged night for the occultists. And so I don't want us to think, oh, that's a cute little thing, and like you said, have a cute, well, that's a cute little idol, and bring that into us.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how do we still have fun, celebrate us being together without giving people that ideology? Oh yeah, they accept that. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, I do think one of the most important things for the church right now is to recognize that we are reaching people who are post-Christian. And most people think that the church is against fun. And so something as simple as a trunk or treat to say, look, we're not going to do a huge production, but we'll create a safe space. You get to have candy. Your kids are adorable. It's going to be fun. Like, just doing a little alternative thing. And, one of the things that I have noted in the past, like, I think I even talked about this on a Sunday a few weeks ago. It was like a family came through asking if we're going to do trunk or treat this year. These are the connections that we have with the neighborhoods that, build relationships so that when a crisis happens or they recognize their spiritual need, like, they know where to go, because that church created a space that expressed some care for me and for my family. And so, yeah. Jeff, I see your comments here. Yes, harvest party, because we are reaching out to the community, loving our community. Yeah. So creating these kinds of alternative things is good. Ignoring the issue or the day is not helpful, I don't think. As much as but to create a different path, to do a different thing, or a place that is safe and welcome for people, that is not demonic, is good. Like, one of the worst things that we could do, I'll just get back on that soapbox. Some churches do this thing called a hell house, and I hate it. It's a haunted house to show people what will send you to hell, essentially. And there was a really big one in Marysville for years and years and years, and it was awful. It was terrible. And then the last house is like, well, are you ready to accept Jesus? It's like, I don't know what I'm feeling right now. So like, there's like, you can try to counter program so hard that like, it is just terrifying. Or to create a place where it's like, hey, we are normal people and we want you to feel welcome and comfortable here. And we're ready for the questions you may have. We're ready for the conversations you want to have. But yeah, so we have to kind of walk with wisdom and humility in these times, knowing that we are not the dominant culture around us anymore.
Can I
So.
say one more thing? I mean, I think it's one of those things by us. I think it should be faith over fear. I mean, for that day, all the occultists and whatever, instead of us going, oh, we're scared of Halloween, show the proof of the Lord, that the Lord can override anything occultist.
Yeah.
You know,
And that
maybe
stuff's
I don't know. What would
around
maybe?
too. We don't need just a day for that.
Huh?
I'm sorry. What'd you say, Lizzie?
Oh, I was just saying, I mean, I've worked with people who are self-proclaimed witches and stuff, and they don't need just one day to like focus on that. Their dark things are at work all year round, and I think focusing our energy on that is going to keep us from doing other good stuff. So
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. All right. Any other questions on Deuteronomy? Did you have something else, Carrie?
Would the people be really upset if we had like, Christian music going or anything like that?
I don't think people would be upset, but it might be annoying.
Sure.
So like just to try to fill that much space with sound is going to be uncomfortable.
Sure.
So we could try, but yeah, it's not always easy to be effective. But the better thing is to have conversations with the people as they come.
True.
And like talking to families like, hey, thank you for coming. Like, we're so glad you're here. Like those kinds of things are going to be more hospitable than just playing music that people don't recognize. So
yeah, it's kind of like the same thing we do the purpose for neighborhood dinners, and I was just typing it. It's because we want our purpose is to harvest our neighborhoods, love those that are far from God, and build relationships. And that's how the Lord he works upon our neighbors.
Yeah. So thanks, Jeff. And it's been great. It's been really interesting just to meet all kinds of people at neighborhood table and talk with them, pray with them. Today, a family who only spoke Spanish came through, and I got my Google Translate app out, and we were trying to talk back and forth over technology. And God's moving. And the question is, are we ready to welcome people as they come through? And so, yeah. All right. Any other questions on Deuteronomy? The passage.
Here's some information.
My watch is talking to me now. So
It wants to be part of the conversation.
yeah. She's like, here's some information on Deuteronomy. Well, thank you. I got lots. Watch. So yeah. But if there aren't any more questions tonight, then we can wrap up here, and we'll see y'all Sunday at 9 or 11 or Sunday night or not. If I don't see you in person,
I'll be
next
there
week.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you all. Yeah.
One question on that is that, how it says to tie them, basically bring your next generation, tell your next generation all about what the Lord has done. During those 40 years when they went forward and they were fearful, I wonder at any point in time they stopped, they got comfortable, and they didn't keep continuing telling their future generations about what the Lord had done. That was what made them fearful.
Well, they were fearful in the first few weeks. Well, in the first year, because they were at Sinai for a year, and then they moved to go into the land. And so that was in that first year or 2 years before they were then turned back around into the land, or to wander the wilderness. And so there is indication that the people were talking about what God had done. And we'll see that later on in Deuteronomy. Like, their shoes never ran out. They always had food. Like, you would have to have explained this to like, why is this happening? And how do you harvest the manna every day and enough for the Sabbath day? Like those kinds of things were happening. And so this is like Moses here is just re-emphasizing the importance of that discipline of telling kids, because they're about to go into the land and they're about to get comfortable and things might get easy. And that's when we are most at risk to forget what God has done when things are going smoothly. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the symbolism, kind of like how God always brings us to something and more trials to move your faith and make your faith stronger. Same symbology with them. He kept pushing them to keep their faith going, to trust him more and more. It's like he just backs up just a little bit. Come on, kiddo. I know you can do it.
Yeah, kind of like teaching a kid to walk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
So yeah, so that's part of it. And we'll see when we get to Judges, the people don't always do a good job at this. So they forget. It's like God knows how people are. And he's warning them ahead of time. I know how you are. Please trust me. So like when I tell my kids, like, I know like I know their behavior better than they think I do. And they don't trust me. And I was like, no, trust me. I know this is what you want to do. And then they go do the thing. I said, I knew. And they're like, why did it happen this way? I was like, well, I told you this would happen. So it's, yeah. God, our Father, is an apt understanding of our relationship with him. He knows us. He knows us. So
I think that's why he gives us parenting, because it's kind of a minor glimpse of what he's feeling with us. I told you. And he's looking at us going, now you get to experience what I'm going through in a milder manner.
Yeah. But there's also a positive side.
Mm-hmm.
Like you understand the love of God in a much more powerful way. Because like I was talking with somebody who's expecting a child today.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is their first child. And I was like, your capacity to love is going to explode. And you won't know how this happened. But your heart is just going to like get so big. And that's just a small taste of the love of God. And yeah, being a parent is really helpful to understand God in a lot of ways. So,
well, yeah, even when they're being, not listening, going, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You still want to give them a hug and say, I still love you, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, God is good. And let's focus on his goodness always. So blessings on you all. And we will be back together next week.
All right.
God bless you, Pastor Jason.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.